So we're going to talk about sustainability now. We're going to talk about carbon reduction. We're going to talk about procurement and how that all fits together. But I get really annoyed and bored by conferences where loads of people sit at the front and claim to be the experts, and we talk to you. So I'd like to start by thinking about what you want us to talk about. Obviously, we've prepared stuff, and obviously, we can talk about stuff. But I'd like to know what you guys want us to talk about. Now, before we do that, and I will come to you in a second, so I want you to have a little think about what questions are in your mind about sustainability, procurement, carbon reduction, and everything else. First of all, let's meet the panel. So I'll introduce myself in a second. But Alex, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Yes, I can start, and I hate those mics, so I will go with it. So I'm Alexandra Tarmo. I'm currently at Kenvue, which is the spin-off of J&J. I've been there for a bit more than a year. Before that, I spent all my life in procurement. By the way, I want to say we have a very good school in procurement. I did one of it, and I'm happy to talk about that. There are schools there. And I decided to come to procurement, and still I am, so it's a great place to be. So I'm happy to do any marketing for the function. I could not resist to say that. And now I spent my life in procurement in different consumer good company and in Eton. Just before joining Kenvue, I spent 12 years at Unilever, where I had a different set of job. I probably did all you can touch in procurement. And my last job, which, by the way, this is how we met with Oliver, was it started in procurement partnership. He ended up in procurement sustainability, and I even ended up reporting into sustainability before I decided to move to Kenvue. So I'm also happy to tell you about a bit the barrier between procurement and sustainability and what makes sense. But yeah, and if I'm not at work, I have 3 beautiful boys at home. I'm French, as you can probably hear, but I have a beautiful Italian partner, and I live in Switzerland.
Yeah, it's great to see you again, Alex. Mark?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, quite difficult to follow that, actually. I do have 3 children, though, 3 boys, who are also beautiful and a beautiful partner, so there's that at least. So I'm the founder of DitchCarbon. We work to get sustainability insights into the places where procurement people are working. We integrate with HICS, of course, and super excited to sort of hear more of the challenges that you're sort of facing at the moment and how we could potentially help. That's me.
Excellent. Great. And it's great to finally be at DPW. I've heard so much about this. I'm expecting acrobats and fire eating and all sorts of fun and games over the next couple of days. And I'm a dad to 2 generation alphas, I believe. And when I told my 13-year-old daughter that the dress code was startup casual, she sort of looked at me and went, "What is that, Dad?" And I think it's midlife crisis is so I'm looking at lots of trainers, a few gilets tomorrow, and things like that. But I'm looking forward to a good few days. So thanks to HICS for having us and having us talk about sustainability today. So my name's Oliver Hurrey. I basically chair group therapy sessions for procurement and sustainability for a living, have done for 20 years. I facilitate a chief procurement officer group called the Sustainable Procurement Pledge, which is started by Thomas Udison, CPO of Bayer, and the CPO of Henkel Bertrand. And we are essentially trying to understand how procurement, at last, will lead on sustainability, take it off the hands, perhaps, of sustainability professionals and make it happen. Because I think we all know that sustainability hasn't moved fast enough, and procurement, frankly, is looking for new dimensions and new exciting ways and things to do. So that's one of my challenges, one of the things that I work on. The other thing that I chair is a thing called the Scope 3 peer group, which essentially is about 2,500 people working on supply chain emissions. I've been doing that for the last 5 years. And just in the last month, we've gone to 51% of the group, 2,500 of them, who sit in procurement. So procurement is, in many ways, owning Scope 3. So what I wanted to talk us through today was, and have the panel share with us, was what is it like to be a supplier when you're talking about sustainability and procurement? What's it like for a procurement professional who's having to get their head around yet another massive issue and a massive challenge? Inevitably, we've got to talk about data because we're at DPW, we're in HICS, and we've got Mark, and we've got Alex, and we should talk about data, the importance of data. But I wanted to share this with you as a sort of opener before I ask you what you want us to talk about. So someone must say something, otherwise I'll point you out. In the last month, I asked my Scope 3 peer group and I in fact asked them every month, and each person in there from all sorts of companies, including Kenvue, submit a problem to me. They submit like a status update to me. and they say, this is what I'm worried about when it comes to supply chain decarbonisation, or what I'm focused on. And I find this fascinating every month. I stick it all through ChatGPT, so it's definitely not me doing this. I put all of the data through ChatGPT, and I ask it to say, what are the most common, what are the most popular challenges? Supplier engagement and the use of data has been the #1 challenge for 5 years, because the realities are, when it comes to climate change, sustainability, getting stuff done, ultimately, it's the suppliers that really do the work, and they're the ones that will really drive the change. So how do you engage suppliers? The challenge of engaging particularly less mature suppliers, so smaller suppliers, how do you get people who haven't got the capability or the money or the capacity or the understanding to be able to act on this? How do we improve data quality? How do we get real information on what's really happening and inevitably, hopefully, do something with it? And that hesitancy or inability to give data to the likes of yourselves and other supply chain owners is a big issue. The second one, and I'm glad this is #2, because this is what it should be all about, we'll end up measuring how bad everything was forever, rather than actually doing anything about it. So the majority of the leading companies at the moment want to know, how are we going to actually decarbonize? Not just measure stuff and collect data, but actually drive change. So that's a big challenge. How do we really help suppliers drive that change, and how do we track it and apportion it and so on? Now, regulation and reporting, I don't think that's news to anyone. There's a massive landslide of acronyms, and procurement's trying to get its head around that, of course, as well. Some of it is going very fast. Some of it, including the deforestation regulation, has literally in the last week just been delayed for 12 months, which is like, is that good? Is that bad? I don't know. So it's really, really, really tricky. Now, the final one is, how do you collaborate? Now, this is one of the challenges that, again, it's not about just peer-to-peer collaboration, but it's supply chain collaboration, value chain collaboration. And one of the things that I've been involved in, which I'll perhaps touch on a bit later, is how procurement can collaborate at multiple tiers to actually drive action on not just decarbonisation, but all sorts of issues like child labour and so on. So these are some of the questions and concerns that this group have got. Okay, so we can talk all day about all sorts of stuff, and we have thought about what we're going to say, but what is it that you guys would like us to cover? We're going to have a moment of uncomfortable silence. Yeah. Oh, there's one over there. What a throw that was, by the way.
Good throw.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah.
This is Bogdan. I'm representing Coca-Cola. So I heard you about talking about the deforestation legislation, and I'm not sure if you just said that the legislation have been delayed for 12 months. This is something important because I'm just about to initiate an RFP to select a platform for.
Oh, well. You've got 12 months, is the answer. Yeah.
Can you provide some references to this? That would be very helpful for me.
I will definitely cover that, yeah, and I'll probably catch up with you after. Do you want to chuck it to this lady here?
I've heard, but I'm not sure, and I haven't researched, so maybe you know more than me on this, but AI and sustainability, that maybe all of these data centers that they've been building for AI and all of these improvements are actually not the best thing, but I don't know. So I would love to learn more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Chap at the front there, Mark, remember that one?
Hey, hello. Everyone's using spend-based emission factors for supply chain reporting, basically, and a lot of like industry average instead of primary data. So how to get to more actionable data from supply chains?
Yep, that's definitely up there, without a doubt. The gathering of primary data.
Hi, this is Rolf. I have got a question for the Mr. from Coca-Cola. Why do you want to delay? Or why do you say, hey, it's 12 months?
Well, yeah, no, sure. That's a good point.
Why don't you want to start with it?
I don't want anyone to delay, but I'm just saying they have delayed it, which will make some people delay and the right people actually get on with it. But yeah, it's a prioritization thing. It's a good point, though.
Continue pushing.
Yeah, yeah. Lady at the front.
It's quite
Okay,
soft.
thank you. My struggle is with supplier engagement, and we are deriving a strategy and saying, okay, we foresee that we can influence on 3 points. And you can also say, okay, I will make my supplier do an SBTi target.
Yeah.
So how do you prevent the double counting of the same carbon emissions, basically?
Yeah, yeah, good question. It's all good stuff, isn't it? I wasn't
Good
expecting. Let's have one more. Is that one? Pass just behind you. Yep.
Hi, I'm Sebastian, and I'm especially interested in the regulation and reporting for tail. To give you an example, I buy more than 300,000 tons of aluminium every year, and I love CBAM. But I also buy maybe a few hundred kilograms of steel and iron, and CBAM is asking for exactly the same reporting requirement, full embedded, direct, indirect. How do I avoid losing my time, managing the complexity of 200 kilo when I have 300,000 to optimize next to it?
Yeah, absolutely. So CBAM, if anyone isn't aware of it, is a thing called the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, which essentially is almost putting a carbon price on certain materials like steel in order to try and encourage more sustainable sourcing of that. So come back to that.
Same question on the EUDR.
Yep.
If I'm being asked to provide the geolocation of the rubber plantation used to make the rubbers that one supplier used to make a seal that might be sold to us, how do I do that? How do you manage the reporting requirements versus irrelevancy for your business?
Yeah. Thank you. I'll have that back. And I think the elephant in the room here is, with all the regulation and reporting, are we going to just be stuck doing regulation and reporting and collecting data rather than actually driving any change? And, I was at Climate Week in New York a couple of weeks ago, which was utter madness. And that was one of the big key questions. It's wonderful, all the regulations coming in to raise the bar, but how are we going to deal with all of that challenge, and particularly when so many people are going to be spent counting things on spreadsheets or in proper tools rather than actually driving action. Okay, that was better than I thought, wasn't it? There was some good stuff in there. So maybe reflections from you, Alex. What do you feel like the sort of status we're in on sustainability? There's all this regulation, there seems to be a platform promising for everything. There's a data challenge. Where do you think we are?
Yeah, and I was just reflecting where to start. So let me tell you a story. So I'm a procurement practitioner. I'm not a sustainability practitioner, or I was not, I would say. I've never been a guru or educating into it. It happened to me when I was at Unilever one day because I had a revelation in one of those events that we were so late on supply diversity. So my whole journey on sustainability started on supply diversity. Just because I went to an event, I was blew up by where other companies were and how far we were being Unilever, and we were Unilever. Came back to my CPO at the time, Dave, I said, it's not okay. He said, I agree, you go and you fix it. We started the journey from zero, personally as Unilever. But the good thing, and I'm going to the West, is that you're not alone. We are not alone. So I reach out to all my peers, my competitors, people like Oliver, all the people in the world that have tackled the problem years before us. And like that, we drive our program, we start our program, and I think our program has been very successfully moved to the next step, but I'm very proud of what we did. Then from that, David came back a year after. He said, you know what, now we have published our living wage commitment, which, if you ask me, this is a very bold commitment, because the regulation is not there. Nobody was telling you all your supply needs to be paying a living wage. Unilever made a commitment with no idea how to get there. But again, I reach out to people like, these gentlemen, other people, my peers, my competitors. Unfortunately, many little of us were in the journey. It was basically on Ernst and L'Oreal when we started. But we start, and we get somewhere. Then you have follow Unilever, have changed and adapt the commitment. I'm still very, we were discussing at lunch, I'm still very glad that they did it, and the commitment, they kind of slightly changed. It's still good. And still there is no regulation that is pushing us to do it. Then, you're going to the more, I would say, green part of sustainability, because from there, I suddenly end up being in carbon. And for me, it was much easier. Because, when you've been driving supply diversity, living wage, and human rights, which came with the package, again, not being a lawyer, not being an expert, I suddenly have to also look at the West, which was for us the whole food challenge, the palm oil, and the scope 3. It was almost easier, because at least it's tangible. You're talking about what you buy, you're talking about a lot of data, you're talking about suppliers. And again, you're not alone, and there is probably even more people, more science, more data. I came to DPW 2 years ago. You had a lot of you, or some of you, or companies that are there to help. So, and then we drove it. Then, of course, on that part came more strict regulation and requirements that also are changing and evolving. So I'm telling you that story because First, I think you should not be driven by reporting. And again, I was reporting to sustainability my last year in Unilever. Reporting was a big part of what we do, and we are a publicly listing company, so eventually once per year we had to go to the reporting and to put everything in our report. So I'm not saying reporting is not important and is not part of the job, but I really encourage all of us to start a journey not for reporting purpose and not for regulation purpose. It has to be done because it's the right thing to do, number one, as a human being. Number two, because there is a business case for it, and sometimes it will be a long business case, but there is a business case for it. And number three, we have to do it because everybody is doing it, and it's easier. And so if you rely on your supplier, and Eloise was saying that, it's not going to be perfect, but start with what you got and drive a certain journey. Now, I came to Kenvue, we are very new. We basically have to set up our own target for Kenvue spinning off from J&J. We're doing that, we did that, we have published some. I feel very good because we are not last, but we are, in the latest group. So it will be easier for me as a company to follow. Reporting, I think we can sit here in 10 years and still debating about reporting and regulation. I don't see that going away. I'm sorry to tell you, but this is going to be an ongoing challenge. So don't wait for regulation and just drive what makes good business impact.
Yeah, good voice. Marc?
Yeah, really interesting. So I think a lot of it is around the measurement thing. Totally agree, by the way. And we sell measurement to lots of carbon accountants, and it's an important thing. But it's just a thing. It's like if you're on a diet or trying to lose weight, you weigh yourself. It's not the act of weighing yourself that makes you weigh less. It's the other actions that you take. So we're very much trying to make it easy for procurement people to do that. And I think, Alex was saying this before, just start. Don't worry too much about, what are we going to do in 5, 10, 50 years' time? What can you do today? And the thing that we always advocate for is to change your onboarding. Like, in 10 years' time, that's when the net zero targets are really going to start to bite for the corporations. The suppliers that you have then and their emissions then are vastly more important than the emissions that you have today. It's just a starting point. So, and it's super easy because new suppliers really want to work with you, and new suppliers will do whatever you want them to do to become your supplier. Existing tier 1 suppliers, really hard to change, right? And so I think that's where I just start. Just start by sending those really important market signals. Let your suppliers know, we want this. And it doesn't matter if they're not all SBTI today. Just say, look, we're going to start prioritizing SBTI. Okay, I'm a potential customer to Coca-Cola, BASF, or whoever. That's something that I know is important. I'm going to start working towards it. So I think, it's a big goal, and we're all going to have to do a lot of work to get there. But actually, just starting with something simple is the easiest way to get going. And you'd be amazed at the impact that can have. It really is. So, yeah. I could probably talk for another hour and a half, but I'm going to pause there to sort of...
And I think if you were to summarize literally every session at Climate Week, and there were, God knows how many hundreds of sessions, the cliche was always just get started. That was always the cliche you heard from the stage, just get started. Occasionally people told you actually how to get started, but generally that was the cliche. The second cliche was the word collaborate. I'm sure you're going to hear it loads. It's the word of the whatever generation we are, the Zennials or something, I'm not sure what I am. But the word collaborate gets overused. It means many things to different people. But to collaborate, if you're not already talking to your peers, your fellow peers in companies, including your fellow procurement professionals who buy the same stuff as you, then you need to start doing it. I famously have a Google Doc of 237 sustainable procurement initiatives. There's one for everything. There's one for potatoes, there's one for diamonds, there's one for pharmaceuticals, there's something for everything. There is no excuse to not be already talking to your peers. And again, there's ways around that, competition concerns and things like that. You can at least start having that conversation. There are the initiatives out there. So I think we should get on to supplier engagement. But I'm intrigued, as I say, the challenges that came out of Climate Week. So I was with about 80 CPOs. We now are taking through the Sustainable Procurement Pledge a huge army of chief procurement officers to Climate Week. We go the week before all the craziness starts. We try and get all the work done before the sustainability crowd turn up. And we had 80 CPOs there this time. And the difference, I can assure you, between watching procurement professionals and sustainability professionals work on sustainability is quite stark. You see procurement professionals getting annoyed and angry if stuff's not being agreed and done. Whereas sustainability professionals, trust me, having been one for 20 years, there's nothing we love more and sitting in rows of chairs and listening to one of us stand at the front and go, it's really difficult, isn't it? It's really difficult. So seeing procurement take action on that. But there was one CPO, I won't say exactly who they were, but they're brand new in role as a CPO for one of the leading companies on Scope 3 and carbon reduction. Their project in their supply chain on Scope 3 has won all the awards, and he was a brand new CPO. But he spoke beautifully about it. He spoke in procurement language about the opportunity for procurement. And the one thing that he said that stuck with me that I think I brought with me and talked to us is he said, the one thing for suppliers is they must know you're serious about carbon, and they must know that you're going to help them. And I thought that was excellent, because if you don't have both of those things next to each other, supplier engagement gets very difficult. If they don't know you're serious, then you're sending them billions of questionnaires with lots of questions that are clashing with lots of other customer questions. And if they don't think you're serious, they're not going to bother engaging around them. But the other thing is they need help. So suppliers don't magically have the expertise to be able to reduce carbon. No one really knows what they're doing on carbon reduction yet, let alone smaller suppliers who don't have that capability. So unless you've got that good balance between being helpful and being serious, then you're going to really struggle with supplier engagement. So questions back to you guys. So when it comes to the frank reality of what it's like to be a supplier in supply chain sustainability world, we are still seeing ridiculous amounts of survey fatigue. We're still seeing expectations put on suppliers. What are some of your thoughts about how you've experienced that, and what you think some of the solutions are?
So yeah, I can tell you. So I agree, and I will add probably to being serious and being helping. I think we also need to be humble, and I think it is okay to also share with supplier that we don't have all the answer and we need help. Which again, I really recommend that when you come to that, we all have to be very humble to each other, because I don't think any of us have tackled the problem, and including all the tech, because otherwise, people will be millionaire here. So I've seen it. So I agree with you. The key thing is to share whatever material you have with all your suppliers. I don't believe into a competition, and I'm sure there are lawyers here. I don't believe in competition or in secret when it comes to sustainability. So we have to share widely, and we have to share starting from suppliers. So a lot of us have been we did that in Unilever, we're doing that in Kenvue. I'm sure some of you are doing it, doing supplier guide, how to tackle climate, how to tackle Scope 3, how to tackle issue. We need to share that. But as you do that came the other challenge, which I think is the bigger challenge for the supplier, and we heard that when we launched our supplier program back in May at Kenvue. We had a specific session on sustainability because we tackled all the pillars of the program. And what they told us is that it's great that you want to help, it's great that you're going to give us material, but we are just having huge fatigue. And we are overloaded with all of you in the industry coming with the same requirement. And by the way, not all of you are using the same tool and the same format. So I think what I'm seeing and hearing from our supplier is no doubt. They're all people like us. They want to do it. They know it's the right thing to do. They know we have no time to save the planet, and it's good business for them as well. But the challenge is, where do they start? And then when we come about reporting and following up, we're talking to a lot of us. So we need to find a way, and we had at Kenvue to be humble and say, look, if there are already some tools in use, like an EcoVadis or whatever, let's stick to that. Yeah, it's not perfect. Yeah, it's not having everything. And I'm not getting paid by EcoVadis. It's just the reality that we're using them. Let's use them. Let's not provide a new platform on top where I know 90% of my suppliers are already doing it one way. And I think that's my requirement, is that we need to all be conscious that a supplier talks to all of us. So as much as we can collaborate, and I think that's the key, and provide ideally in few years one way of collecting collectively, I think we will make our supplier to follow much easier.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if there is data available on those existing suppliers, asking them twice, 3 times through it is very frustrating. As a supplier to corporates, being asked to fill out very long forms and then ask the same information 3 different ways is absolutely infuriating. But I think being serious and saying the support is there is a really key point that we should probably pick up on. Actually being very clear during your procurement process. If you do not do these things, we cannot onboard you as a supplier. Because you're in a high carbon intensity category, we cannot onboard you unless you've got renewable energy in place, for example. But being very clear where the hotspots are in your supply chain and being very strict about how you onboard those suppliers, I think is the thing that everyone can do. So it's very easy to identify if they're a high carbon supplier. It's very easy to identify whether they're using renewable energy or not. And that's just one example of an absolute sort of table stakes if you're serious about sustainability. Because what you need to do is send that market signal and tell people this is what we want. And the market will adapt. You know, we saw it with COVID. We could suddenly produce trillions of face masks. We could suddenly get around and communicate far more effectively. Zoom share price went through the roof. The market will react if you send the strong enough signals to it, is really the way that I see that sort of changing.
Yeah, and maybe Mark at the point, I just want to add, having the recognition and the reward. So, and again, I can talk for both Unilever and Kenvue, the same approach, the way we're doing our, whatever you call it in different companies, the joint account plan, the joint partnership agreement, your super contract, your super supplier. This is always part of it. And it's part of it as a requirement to be part of the club, but it's also part of the clear KPI we're going to follow strategically. It's not a contract, it's a strategic agreement, a strategic framework. We are defining together what do we want to achieve in the next 3 years on sustainability, on scope 3. And then we put that and we track it, which means we track it at the top to top level for both companies. And it's part of the journey together. So it's another outcome, like you track your saving and your service and your efficiency. We have made a decision to put sustainability part of the equation.
Yeah, and reviewing that in the same way that category manager's performance, sustainability, price, speed, all the rest of it. I think raising it in the table stakes very important.
Yep.
And the data is available to get that. There are lots of providers that do that, and it's relatively easy to integrate into your sustainability process. And I always say that if you're all super motivated about it, that's fantastic. But what about the category manager that you haven't spoken to in 3 weeks, or the person that's about to onboard a new supplier? Do they know what it is they should be asking for your suppliers? And that's really the only way you can change sustainably, pardon the pun.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of things that I'd recommend people looking up. So in terms of alignment on standards, it's happening very, very fast on data. Has anyone heard of the PACT program by WBCSD? It's called the Partnership for Carbon Transparency. I was at the meeting in New York, and we actively support it. It's about creating a standard for sharing product carbon footprint data and getting all platforms to be PACT conformant. So no matter what platform you choose, you'll be able to be making sure that product carbon footprint data can be comparable and measurable. I highly recommend checking that out. Another thing in terms of helping your suppliers to know you're serious, there's a thing called the Chancery Lane Project. If you Google that, essentially 700 lawyers have got together to write the climate change clauses that you can put in your contracts. And they are literally cut and paste downloadable for free. And it's written by some of the best lawyers in the world. So if everyone used those contract clauses and climate change clauses in their contracts, we'd consistency and we'd end up with high quality as well. The other thing I would highlight in terms of the Get Serious thing is something I've been running and facilitating with both the Sustainable Procurement Pledge and the Scope 3 Peer Group for the last 9 months, is writing a methodology for embedding carbon pricing into tender decisions. So it's worth checking out the work of Haleon, which was the spin-off from GSK, a bit like Kenvue from J&J. They have gone out as a result of Climate Week last September, the September before, and their CPO, Richard Craner, said, right, we're going to do carbon pricing. He wrote to 400 suppliers and said, if you don't give me product carbon footprint data, we'll take your emission factor and we'll add 50%. So there'll be essentially a malus on not providing any data to us. That put the cat amongst the pigeons, created a lot of new conversations, and over 190 different procurement sustainability professionals have been writing that shared methodology, which will be released in the next month or so. If any of you want to be involved, there's no cost. We'd love to have your insight. I can invite you to the next meeting at the end of October, but that's going to be very exciting. Led by procurement, showing the suppliers that you're serious, and then inevitably will be the support program that will go alongside it to help them actually understand how to do product carbon footprinting. So there's a few things for you to be Googling and checking now. So we've got about 10 minutes left. I wanted to talk about the role of procurement. So it's something I feel quite passionate about, having spent 10, 15 years listening to sustainability professionals like myself moan at each other, and then the last 5, 10 watching procurement say, no, we're going to get some stuff done. I know where my allegiances lie in terms of who's going to drive sustainability forward. But how do you think procurement needs to own sustainability? Because it is yet another thing on a list of things that procurement's expected to be experts about.
First, let me ask, who is in procurement in the room?
Yeah, hands up if you're in
Who
procurement.
is in procurement?
All of them.
Pretty much everyone. Anyone from sustainability in the crowd?
Very good.
Ah.
One.
So I've only upset you and me, so that's
Very
fine. That's fine.
No, look, very good. And again, there's two ways to look at that, because it's a bit like data. Who is responsible for data? We're having always a discussion internally. Who is responsible for data? I argue everybody in the company should be in charge of data and sustainability to start with. But that's Alex Tarmo view, because otherwise you don't drive it. We had a debate years back about who do you put sustainability, who is in charge. I really argue everybody, at least in consumer good or consumer-facing industry. Marketing should be also in charge of sustainability. Sales, back to the problem of the bottle and whatever. Having said that, the reason why I believe procurement is key to driving sustainability, and again, and look at me, we are not the sustainability experts, so I need my sustainability group to provide the expertise, the advocacy, the support. But how we move the needle, especially when we talk about scope 3 or when we talk about human rights, has to be procurement. And there is the only reason is because we managing relationship with suppliers. And if we want to drive it, we have to drive it with an ecosystem that starts with suppliers. And again, I've been in both camps in Unilever. I've been doing it in procurement. I've been doing it in sustainability. I think now it's back to procurement, the implementation I'm talking about. Because the only way you drive change is by driving supplier in the journey. And the only way you drive supplier in the journey is to be clear about what are the consequences of following, not following, what's the incentive, how do I drive, also my peers, my competitor, my tier 1, 2, 3, blah, blah, blah. Only procurement can orchestrate that. I don't think, and again, I've been working very closely, and I love Rebecca and all my sustainability colleagues, it is not a sustainability team role, because they will need the relationship with the supplier. And also, I'm saying it's not me, the head of procurement, it's the role of every single buyer that is talking to a supplier every day. So I really argue everybody should be in charge of sustainability. It cannot be totally detached for, I'm buying chemical, I'm buying packaging, and then there is a team centrally doing sustainability. It just doesn't work. But also we have to be careful and again humble as procurement that sustainability requires some expertise, and the more you go into the social piece of sustainability, the more it is critical. So don't go and just run alone. In doubt, make sure you got also the expertise you need to be able to engage properly with the supplier. But the engagement has to be in the hand of procurement.
Agreed. Marc, role of procurement?
Yeah, I think I'm old enough to remember the days before social media. I mean, some of you might be as well. But when social media first started coming out, I was in marketing at the time, and you hired a social media expert, and they reported to PR because it was a bit like PR. And then everyone realized how important social media was, and then PR couldn't be trusted. They wanted to put it under marketing, and now social media sits very clearly under marketing. And I think it's the same with sustainability. It's just too important to be left to a sustainability person alone. And actually, procurement people are incredibly well qualified to do this. It's about negotiation, it's about driving change, it's about considering multiple factors when making a decision. And so it just has to be procurement. There is no other way that you can reduce carbon footprints without procurement being absolutely leading it, and on all fronts. I think the mistake that a lot of sustainability platforms make is they say, well, look, it's Tuesday, so let's log into our sustainability platform today and think about what our suppliers are doing. Does not work. It needs to be done in context. It's great if a supplier is half the carbon footprint of everybody else, but if they can't deliver on time and they're 3 times the price, it's not an option, is it? So it needs to be considered in conjunction with everything else. And again, procurement, whether you like it or not, you are the best people for the job, and I think that's where it will end up, 100%.
Yeah, and I think Eloise mentioned about the challenge of cynicism, and obviously the challenge of what's going to happen in North America very soon, this idea of this fork in the road and everything else. I think it's pretty obvious to everyone that climate change is an issue. I mean, you can see what's happening in the strength of the hurricanes, et cetera, et cetera. And going back to Eloise's kind of mega trends, ultimately, more climate change is seeing more migration. So we're seeing more migration because of the stresses and strains, obviously particularly in the global south. More migration means generally social unrest, nationalism, populism. What do nationalist and populist governments tend not to believe in? Climate change. And you end up with this kind of vicious circle. So the reality is there, it is going to rely on business to drive this and to change this. The majority of the impacts on climate change are in supply chains. Procurement runs supply chains. Procurement will save the world. It is literally as simple as that. And that, if you want, with great power comes great responsibility, is the SPP phrase. So good luck, guys.
And Oliver, if I can, there is one last point to that, is that, and going back to Eloise, and again, I have, 3 teenagers at home. I'm sure we all have young people around us. This is what they want to do. And by the way, you okay?
Careful.
I hope it was not a joke by someone.
Is the bar open?
But this is what the young people want, and they will not even give us a choice. I mean, so first, I think it's a great way to attract people in procurement. When we talk about, how do we attract people to procurement, that's what excites them. That's what excites me. It's not about delivering your saving or whatever. And second, I think the young generation coming in force as our employee, but more importantly as our consumer, will not give us a chance. This is no debate. I mean, I have a 17 years old and a 12 years old at home. It's not even a debate. You just have to do it. They don't even understand why we're not fixing it. So I think as procurement being the one saving the company, but also as company having all of us operating ultimately for a consumer, by the way, we all consumer, it's no chance to do something different. So regulation or not, we talked about, we have postponed deforestation by a year. Okay, let it be. It's still the right thing to do. Now, I understand, and I just want to finish that because I'm having the debate as we speak with all the other priority we have on procurement, because to your point, procurement is also overloaded, and if there is fatigue with supplier, there is fatigue with us. It's a choice, ultimately. But on when do you start and when do you pause? But I don't think there is a choice anymore of not engaging. Or if everyone disagrees, I'm very happy to have a coffee or beer or wine chat, because I don't think there is another way. Yeah. The young generation will not allow us to not tackle it.
And the procurement professionals of the future. So I'd say, other than the carbon pricing methodology, one of the most popular topics in the CPO group that I chair is about talent. One of the things we've tried to do is write a best practice template for a procurement job description, actually back to that earlier point, and making sure how do you fit sustainability in there. Because I'm sure you've noticed procurement professionals coming in, although people tend to fall into procurement, I'm told. It tends to be that case. But the realities are the people falling into procurement are suddenly saying, well, hold on, I don't just want to talk about cost. There must be other goals and things we can align behind for the business. So it's definitely going to be crucial to hiring the best procurement talent is to have that message clear. Any other thoughts from you, Mark?
I was going to pick up on the spend-based factors, but it's quite a
Yes,
detailed
please
one
do.
at this stage.
Let's
I don't know whether we want to go there or not.
No, let's do it. Let's do it.
So I think, it's a continuum of accuracy, right? And, spend-based methods saying, right, I've spent, £500,000 on steel is one way of doing it, right? And then what you really want at the end is, I bought this bit of steel from this smelter and all the rest of it. And I think that often sustainability people sort of barge into the room and say, no, you can't make a decision on that. It's not accurate enough. Well, is it directionally accurate? And that's what I'd encourage you to think about. Is it directionally accurate? Because if it is, then use that to make a decision. Then you'll get a little bit further down the line, and then you can sort of get the more accurate data which comes. But do not let accuracy be a barrier to action, because most of the time, you're probably going to be directional, even with the spend-based emission factor. We have some solutions around that, around using sort of supplier-level emission factors, but that's probably a separate conversation. But I think, I see it so often. They go, oh, we can't make decisions because we don't have product-level data. Total rubbish. You do not need product-level data to make decisions. You need product data to make accurate calculations, but there are two very different things. Yeah. Calculation is sustainability, optimization is procurement, and you are incredibly well qualified to do that with the data and the tools you have available today. Don't listen to anybody else that tells you that you need more data to make more decisions. You just need to use it in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is what we're actually trying to do, not to accurately measure how bad everything was a year ago. We're trying to drive actual decarbonisation. And one of the things we discussed in New York was the fact that if you sat down, procurement with sustainability and all the necessary stakeholders, and had a good guess about where the carbon is in your supply chain, and had a good guess 100%. About how to engage those suppliers and work with them, you're 90% right. What you could also do is spend a year pontificating about it, deciding between platforms and tools, getting expensive consultants in, and ultimately arriving at the same decision. You could do that, but that just gets started means that there's some good things. It's worth looking up GSK's thoughts on this. GSK have a thing called no regret actions. In their sustainability and sustainable procurement plan, they have no regret actions. These are things that you just go and do, and you do not need data to tell you. Talking to your suppliers and engaging them on renewable energy, a no regret action. Just go and do it. You don't need data to tell you that. Okay, I think we're pretty much at time, but is there any questions? Any final questions or thoughts for our panel before we stop? There we go.
Hola.
That's it.
Not great,
Knock over the CEO of Hicks. Good job,
Right,
mate.
so
Good job.
quick question, and I'm maybe taking the other side, but these are all things which, of course, are a cost and an overhead. So yes, the right thing to do, but I think regulation has really driven this forward, which is great. But how do you reconcile still, or how do you pitch it to your board and more so shareholders? Because here we're talking about these things, but for sure in other procurement discussions, it still is about sales and cost and those things. And how do you pitch that to a board where you're optimizing for shareholder value versus it's just the right thing to do? Because I have a board, it's hard to tell them, well, it's just the right thing to do. And I'm sure many others face that challenge in a corporate environment. Is there any kind of views, because you've spoken to lots of...
It's a great question. It's a great question. The obvious question, yeah?
I mean, I'm just conscious that we can go along for that. So I would say it's the right thing to do and it's the right business thing to do. So of course we're not NGO, none of us. So look, there are a few things. So first thing on scope 3 and some of the sustainability ultimately also turn in saving money. So some of the initiatives are also easier than those, because if you look at reducing consumption, ultimately you're spending less. There are some topics which are more complicated to get to the value. So ultimately, this is where you work cross-functionally on building the business. Because I can tell you, living wage, where you're basically going to suppliers, asking them to raise the salary of their employee, you can understand it is totally counterintuitive when you go and do it. But still to that point, and I have left since, but I know it's been done without cost, additional cost. So I think there are ways to do it. But first, it's about finding the right business case, which will depend on which company you're in. Again, the consumer, the brand, the product you're selling. But also start with the easier one. And I think on scope 3 or scope 1, 2, 3, there is a way to do it which doesn't really turn into adding cost. When we talk about probably sustainable packaging and living wage, it's probably more complex, but still, and it has to be part of a set of KPIs, as I said. So you never only go for one. So I think the first thing to do is probably to make sure that you can land a set of targets which are a combination of. And by the way, forget sustainability 30 years ago. It was already the problem about quality, service, and cost. We held the challenge. I mean, again, I've been in procurement more than 20 years. 20 years ago was, how do I balance cost and service? Well, now we just have added sustainability into that, but it's the same thing. So I do not believe that today a board will shut down anyone because you want to invest in sustainability. I do not believe. They will probably shut down the first time, but there is a way. Because again, today, there is no other way because everybody is doing it. So I don't think any one of us cannot not tackle scope 1, 2, or 3 today.
Yeah, great points. I would say that there's three very board-friendly reasons to do this, right? The first one is you can access a lower cost of capital. There are cheaper loans and cheaper financing options if you have a good ESG rating. If you are shown to reduce your carbon footprint, you can access all the finance that all the large corporates use every day cheaper. So you will save money on the interest that you pay on your loans. Number two, you will save money compared to the EU carbon taxes that you will end up paying. Now, look, I think every reasonable person, I'm going to be political, will be wanting the American election to go a particular way. Whichever way it goes, the EU is bigger and stronger, right? And so the EU is not going to change its legislation because Trump gets into office in North America. And so that regulation will continue to carry on. And there are taxes coming in that's part of what CBAM is, and you'll have to actually pay taxes on the carbon you emit unless you reduce it now. And the third one is increasing in sales. As Alex has made the point really passionately, everybody is doing this. If you're the only beverage provider that hasn't reduced their carbon footprint and isn't able to say that your carbon footprint is like anybody else's and your bottle is recyclable, the rest of it, you are going to be a pariah, essentially, and you're not going to be into those larger opportunities, and the consumers are going to reject you. So, cost of finance, reducing tax burden, increasing sales, I think those are pretty powerful things for boards to react to. And that's definitely the language that we use when we talk to people. I think that everybody wants to do the right thing, but actually these are really good reasons why you there's a fiduciary responsibility to do the right things as well as a moral one, I would say.
Yeah, great points. And because Mark's too humble, I would just like to point out that if you're looking for a way to get data very easily about your suppliers, not from your suppliers, Mark is pretty darn good at that, so I'd speak to him.
Thank you.
But I'd just like to thank Alex and Mark. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.